All right, let's dive in. Today we're looking at a document that puts forward a pretty radical idea. It's an argument that basically challenges centuries of religious practice by asking one really simple question about its foundational text. This is the Quran's final position. So here's the big question at the heart of this entire document. The way you answer this one thing, it argues, changes everything. Is the scripture a single, standalone book? Or is it more like the final chapter in a much, much larger divine library? According to this source, pretty much everything hinges on that distinction. And the argument here is super focused. It's not a scattered critique. It's what it calls a singular, structural grievance. It claims that modern religious practice has, well, abandoned what the Quran itself says the book is. Okay, so what exactly is this supposed misunderstanding? Well, it all boils down to how you define a single term, the book. See, the argument goes like this. When the Quran talks about al-Kitab, which means the book, it isn't just talking about itself. Nope. It's referring to this whole continuous line of revelation from God. That includes the Torah, the Psalms, and the Gospel. So in this view, the Quran isn't a replacement for the old stuff, it's the final installment in this series. And to back this up, the source points to verses just like this one. The idea is that the Quran itself is telling believers, hey, you have to accept all of God's messengers and the books they brought, no picking and choosing. It makes belief in that entire library a fundamental part of the faith. Okay, so if the book is really this whole library, then what's the Quran's job in all this? Is it just another book on the shelf? Not according to this document. It argues the Quran has a very specific and very crucial role to play, the role of guardian. And that special role is captured in this one Arabic word, muhaimin. The source we're looking at defines this as being a guardian, a watcher, and arbiter. So the Quran's job is to be the final judge over the entire collection. It's there to confirm the original truth that's in the earlier scriptures and, just as importantly, to correct any human changes that might have crept in over time. This table really helps lay it all out and show where this Quran final position fits in. You can see it's not the same as a Quran-only view, which would reject those prior books. And it's also different from what's labeled here as the traditionalist stance, which the document argues often ignores the prior books while adding a lot of later human writings as sources of authority. The Quran final position tries to find a middle path. It says yes to the prior books, but a firm no to any human additions being put on the same level. And this is where we get to the core critique of the document. The argument is that by moving away from this Quran final model, what's been created is something new, a kind of hybrid religion. So how does this hybrid work? According to the source, it's built on what it calls a double violation. On one hand, you're subtracting from the book by ignoring the Torah, Psalms, and Gospel, but on the other hand, you're adding to the book by treating human compilations like sayings and commentaries as if they're divine revelation, which they're not. So the real takeaway here, the main point the document is making, is that the dominant practice has shifted. It's no longer just submission to the book, as the Quran defines it. Instead, it's become submission to this new formula, the Quran plus a bunch of human compilations. And to really hammer this point home, the document uses verses like this one as a kind of direct challenge. The implied question is, pretty powerful. If God's own words, his verses, aren't enough for you, then what statement from a human being are you possibly going to believe? Now, this isn't just some abstract academic debate about theology. The source is very clear that this has real, tangible consequences in people's lives. And to show that, it gives a specific case study to demonstrate how, in its view, moving away from the Quran standard can lead to actual injustice. So let's look at the example. First, the source lays out the procedure for divorce as described in the Quran. And it's very clear. It's a deliberate process. You need witnesses, there's a waiting period. It's a series of clear steps. It's definitely not something that's supposed to be rash or spontaneous. But then, the document presents a real-world case that's completely different. A situation where a single statement, said in anger, was ruled to be a final, binding divorce. The source argues that this ruling just completely sidestepped the Quranic procedure and instead relied on interpretations from those later human compilations. And this, the document concludes, is what it calls the fruit of the hybrid religion. You get an outcome where a human ruling is able to override what's seen as divine law, and it causes real harm. And why can this happen? The argument is, it's because the Quran wasn't used as that final arbiter, as the muhaimin. Okay, so we've heard the grievance and the supposed consequences. So what's the solution? Well, the last part of the document is exactly that. It's a call to action, a call to return to what it argues is the original framework. The path forward is laid out here in a few key demands. It's really about a full restoration. The core idea is to accept all of God's revealed books, while at the same time rejecting the idea that any supplementary human texts have equal authority. It's all about putting the Quran back in its intended role as that final guardian, the muhaimin, over all scripture. And what's really important to note is how the source frames this. It's not presented as some new radical ideology. Instead, this Quran final position is described as the true middle path. It's a balanced approach that avoids the two big violations. It doesn't reject God's earlier books, and it doesn't add human traditions to the mix. So, in the end, this entire argument really boils down to one fundamental question. What is the real role of a final revelation? Is its job to completely replace everything that came before it? Or is it meant to be something different, a final lens designed to guard, to clarify, and to complete all the guidance that came before? The document we've just walked through has a very clear answer, and it's a powerful call to return to that vision.